Segment 3, Golden Black Live. Want to thank our sponsors, Triple X, John Basham and the folks at Basham Reynolds, State Farm agent Trent Johnson. Often tuned in. He's working too hard on a Friday afternoon typically to watch us live, but he does from time to time. And, of course, Christy Kuntz and the good folks at Hilton Garden Inn. When it's a big day tomorrow, State HGI tonight down at Wabash Landing. And nothing really happened in the world of Purdue sports yesterday. That was probably one of our 15 of my 20 years, probably one of my 10 or 15 most busy days in terms of just anytime you have an announcement coming, we kind of knew that it was coming, and yet it happens. It was quite a flurry of activity when Morgan Burke had kind of announced his retirement plans.
Yeah, we did kind of know it because circumstance demanded it. When you look at the football situation, if the football situation were more stable, the pre-announcement that Purdue was in the market for his successor wouldn't have been necessary. But Purdue had to get upper leadership established now in the event that they have to do something in football again, because the person outgoing as athletic director isn't going to be the person making that hire. And you're not going to be able to get a coach to come work for an athletic director who's not going to be his boss when he takes the job. So it was absolutely essential for Purdue to add some sort of closure to this, add some sort of timeline to this. And I think obviously the thing that might get lost in this is Morgan Burke's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah.
He's still going to be the AD indefinitely until his successor comes in. After that, we'll kind of see what happens. But he's not leaving right now. So the time, to write his legacy, to talk about his legacy, might not necessarily be right now.
Yeah. And Morgan also had said even a year or two ago that 2017 time frame, who would be 65, was always kind of his target date. So, that also stands to reason. That's why we knew that something was coming along, and at some point in time, that would be the way things would play out. We do have a question from Zach and Brian, and we can both answer this. And what was the best hire that Morgan Burke made? I have a
not a hard question.
But I'll give one B, but you can give one A. Go ahead.
Joe Tiller. It's not even close.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think maybe I'll give one B and one C. I'll say I agree with you on Joe Tiller. I would also look at Matt Painter and that transition worked very, very well from that standpoint. And then I will also, a guy that will be on our show next week, Dave Shondell, is going to talk volleyball. We're really going to talk about Morgan and some of the things he does from a staff standpoint. Dave, a very interesting guy. But I think Dave Shondell and the ability to turn that program around, volleyball, Purdue is a very, very strong program in a very, very difficult league.
And the thing to give Purdue credit for with Dave Shondell, and to a lesser extent Matt Painter, is thinking outside the box a little bit, taking a chance on, somebody who a lot of people might not have otherwise, it wouldn't have been at the front of a lot of people's list. Dave Shondell was a high school coach.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of things made him very qualified for this job in terms of his infrastructure within Indiana. A lot of things made Matt Painter very sensible for this job too, but those were, outside the box, unconventional hires. We can say what we want to say about, the Matt Painter thing worked for basketball, then the succession thing in football was a disaster. That is absolutely true, but you have to give Morgan Burke a lot of credit and for both of those hires for doing something a little bit different and it paying off in a big way.
Yeah, he's really one of the first he was a leader in Division I in terms of having that opportunity to start the transition. And there have been others. He was not the first to do it, but he certainly has implemented it a great deal. And he's given credit by his peers very much. Morgan is very well respected by athletic directors around the country. He's been a leader in NACTA over the years, and that is another thing that has been a very, very important part of his legacy. Then again, I know he never is one to like to talk about his legacy, and we'll be interested to see if we get that type of retrospective type interview with him where he really will look back at some of the things he did well and some of the things that didn't work out, and that will be interesting to see whether that unfolds. In terms of been some talk about the search committee, and Obviously Mike Berghoff, the chair of the Board of Trustees, will chair that committee as well. Kind of an eclectic but interesting group. And obviously you have Rod Woodson and Matt Light, Stephanie White on there. You've got some heavy hitters, people that know what it takes people in Matt Light certainly was not quiet about his desire to get football back to where it needs to be. He's never has been, and Rod Woodson, though football wasn't all that great at Purdue when Rod was here, though he was pretty good, to say the least. It'll be interesting to see what role that search committee has.
Well, the single biggest thing, the Death Star hanging over this entire hire, is obviously football. The next guy has to have some level of expertise in football, or at least give reason to believe that he will have people around him who know football, because Purdue's got to get football fixed. That is the biggest issue, the athletic department faces, one of the biggest issues the university faces. I understand the university side of this has a lot bigger fish to fry than athletics, but this is an issue that affects not only the athletic department, but the entire university. Purdue's just got to get football fixed. That is the biggest job that's going to face this next AD whenever he comes in.
Yeah, even Mitch Daniels, who, there's been a lot of talk about his letter to students and the general public in January about some of the views he'd given on the importance of all that. But I make no mistake, I think that the president is a person that no matter what, if you're going to put some effort towards this whole thing, you might as well try to do it well. And I think that is in football, it certainly is the most vocal, most visible way to do it. The other thing too that Morgan, even I was at an event on Tuesday where Lafayette, where Morgan was talking about the facility, but Morgan's ability to go out, he's obviously been a facility guy, is one of his legacies here at Purdue, but go out and try to sell that facility. We assume he's going to continue to do that hot and heavy until his successor is named, and maybe after.
He's always seemed like the type who wants to see things through that he started, and this football performance complex is a really important deal for the athletic department. I know he's going to want to see that through to the end, and that's going to be a big part of his legacy, is facilities. Now, a lot of this stuff was upkeep that had to be done over time, but that doesn't make it any less significant. The golf course, the pool, the Ross-Ade renovation, the Mackey renovation, wrestling got a new facility.
Baseball, tennis.
Baseball,
everything.
obviously baseball, softball, tennis, all of that stuff have modern facilities now. That stuff had to happen at some point, but Purdue's done it to a level where I don't think facilities are really that huge an issue for any of Purdue's sports anymore. And for the longest time, Purdue had a lot of limitations from a facility standpoint. And so their infrastructure, I think, to compete across the table, across the board, however you put it, I think is pretty solid right now, and that has not always been the case at Purdue.
Well, and Morgan, you mentioned in your column, I thought in a blog after Morgan's the decision or the announcement was made, about angst in the fan base, and in terms of Morgan trying to quell that back when they hired Danny Hope. Didn't work out the way that he wanted to, but also there's a certain thing here, just because of the uncertainty of it all, among a lot of Purdue fans about that angst about are we going to show change in football, and maybe we need change at the top to do this. Now maybe this will give Morgan an opportunity, maybe some additional opportunities to do what he needs to do on the fundraising side, because at least it's out there. We know where it's all going to end.
Yeah, I think there has been a lot of angst, and the funny thing about public opinion tends to be it goes as football goes.
Oh, yeah.
And as football has fallen into the depth it's fallen into, so has public opinion around Purdue, and that's obviously affected the way Morgan Burke is perceived among the fan base. The fact there's some closure there, some finality might go, and it isn't anything personal toward him, but the fact that there is reason to believe that things are going to move in a different direction might lift some of that cloud of negativity that has kind of surrounded the fan base here the last couple of years, and might aid the effort to raise some of this money. You have to give Morgan Burke some credit regarding the Darrell Hazel hire a couple of years ago. They did make a commitment to winning. They did raise a lot of money to get that done. The hire before that obviously was not one they put a lot of resources into, relatively speaking. They made a tremendous commitment, to make that last football hire. It has not worked, obviously, anywhere near the levels people hoped it would, obviously. But Purdue did make a commitment to winning. Nobody wants to win more than Morgan Burke.
Yeah,
that is a huge misperception.
Yeah.
There is a difference sometimes between wanting to win and knowing how to do it, but nobody wants Purdue to be successful more than Morgan Burke does.
Yeah. All you got to do is go back and watch and I was kidding him about that when I saw him this week about getting the airtime, because the last minute or so of the Maryland game in College Park last week, you can see Morgan getting on the refs. Says he's not always proud of that. But he is as competitive a guy as you're ever going to find, and I think that also maybe, and I can't speak for him because we don't have him on the record. We may get a chance to talk to him next week, but the opportunity to maybe that little bit of breadth of knowing where he is will allow him to he's not going to ease into retirement in any way, shape, or form. He will go hard at whatever he's asked to do, and I that part has clearly been a guy that we've all tried to not say to model, but you knew what you're dealing with when you were in the room with Morgan. He's always prepared and always had ideas about what he wanted to get done. All right, now we have some successors lined up that that are kind of, as Brian and I put this list together yesterday. By no means do we have any idea who the search committee is going to look at. We kind of picked the obvious in some ways when we talk about Greg Christopher, Jim Schaus, even Mark Herman, to some extent Sherrod Klingscales. Were our four of choice. How do you feel about that 24 hours later? I mean, it is what it is.
We started with Purdue connections because
Right.
you have to start somewhere, and that's the easy way to start. There is no reason to believe that this hire has to have Purdue connections. In fact, you can make a case that maybe going in an entirely different direction isn't such a bad idea. But we had to start somewhere, and all of those people would be natural fits.
Right.
I think would have some comfort zone, some comfort with the position, would be able to step into some things right away. So that's kind of where we started with things. But they could hire anybody. I think the one parameter has to be some level of football expertise, or at least reason to believe that that person will defer to, have football people around them to defer to and help guide this thing back in a positive direction, hopefully for Purdue's sake.
Yeah, and I think when you look at guys like Greg Christopher, certainly, and Jim Schaus, both guys that are football, have had football experience. Greg's now at Xavier, where they don't have football, but he dealt with football at Bowling Green. Jim has been at Ohio University and has worked in football, has worked in a number of different athletic departments around the country, and yet he's a basketball guy or comes from a basketball family, so that part of it is good. I've had athletic directors say to me in the past, great athletic directors are really good at HR, meaning that they know how to hire people, they know how to get the right people at the right spot. And I think that's the. But I do think, and one thing about the Purdue connection that does come in handy. I still, and maybe because I'm a Purdue person and we both graduated from Purdue, it is a little bit of a different animal, a little bit different type of place, and to come in and have some working knowledge of what you're walking into. May not be the favorite of the fan base, but might be an important thing.
Right, but do you want to hire somebody who's going to perceive things that way? Or is that just kind of, that is kind of the reality?
Yeah.
But I think you do want to keep an open mind about, maybe changing the way things are here. Or I should say not here at Purdue, not here in the TV studio, but here. So I just don't know how they're going to frame this job. I don't know what the realities of the next administration are going to be. But obviously comfort in any sort of position, the ability to hit the ground running, the ability to diagnose what your issues are immediately and go right after them, obviously is very important. It's not a secret what the biggest issue is right away that this person has to attack as soon as they get here.
And I guess that's my point, is it's clear what you have to deal with, but it'll be interesting to see what candidates come to the fore, and ultimately, of the ones we've mentioned, and we had some ancillary candidates too. We talked about Elliot Bloom and Bob Bernard and Pete Quinn, and these are they're all friends of the show, so to speak, but they're also very, very qualified people who would bring different skill sets to the whole thing. And I think actually every one of them is, I do know a couple of them pretty well, of our top four that are guys that would bring that unique, a little bit different approach to it. Jim Schaus hasn't been in West Lafayette on a permanent basis since 1983, for example, but has been all over the country. And Greg Christopher, obviously, it's been 10 years since Greg has been in West Lafayette since his days as an associate athletic director. But it is going to be an interesting process, and we'll also try to talk to Mike Berghoff, and I think that's an interesting thing too. Now, and I know I've had many people say, And Mike was pretty clear that about his intentions here, but the old Dick Cheney example, for those political people out there, that Dick, wanted to find a vice president for George W. Bush, and then ended up being it himself. I'm not saying that's going to happen with Mike, but he is an interesting candidate because, or an interesting person to lead the search, because he has been very close to football, and I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, he already has that comfort zone. Obviously, he was essential in the planning for the football performance complex. I'm sure he's been privy to a lot of difficult conversations related to the football program here over a period of time. A search committee can do whatever they want, but at the end of the day, the university president's got to sign off. And Mike Berghoff is Mitch Daniels' right-hand man when it's come to a lot of this stuff, both at the university and the athletic department. So I think that comfort zone with university leadership, I think, carries some weight. The ability to get things done at the highest levels of this university maybe carries some weight. And whether he's saying right now he wants to do it or not, that doesn't necessarily mean this doesn't all point back to him. So I would think right now, I would say that probably doesn't happen,
Yeah,
but I would not dismiss the possibility whatsoever. He's got the football background, having been an athlete at Purdue, having been a football player at Purdue. Everything I've ever been told about him, he's very invested in athletic success. He's been a great advocate for the athletic department among the trustees and university leadership.
It's been his role, too, yes.
It's been his role.
Yeah,
He's obviously been a very successful guy, so it would be a fit, and I probably wouldn't dismiss it up front.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. Timetable-wise, last question, sooner the better, but it's going to, I got the sense, just reading the tea leaves, they're willing to take some time. Illinois, it's taken some time to get theirs going here, and you can give it, you have some luxury to give it a little more time, because this announcement actually the Burke announcement came earlier than I anticipated that it would.
The one thing I would say is don't ever compare yourself to Illinois in terms of the running your athletic department, ever. But I think you take as much time as you need, make sure you get the right person in place. There's no real hurry. If you get somebody during the summer, great, because the number one thing he or she has to do when they come in is assume oversight of the football situation. So there's really no hurry here. You just want somebody in place come the start of football season. They have to start evaluating everything, and when the time comes, they might have to make some kind of decision here on what direction this is headed in. But that's not a now thing. That's a later thing. So I think if they need 6 months to get this done, so be it.
Yeah. We'll see what happens, and we'll be watching it closely on goldenblack.com and the like as we get to the days and months ahead. And again, we hope to talk to both Mike Berghoff and to Morgan Burke next week as well. All right, I want to thank Brian Newbert for joining us, for Kyle for being our key grip on the side that he came in here, and of course Coach Tim Lester. We're certainly impressed with him. Stacy Clarity for joining us as well. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. I thank our sponsors also, XXX, State Farm agent Trent Johnson, John Basham, the folks at Basham Rental, Hilton Garden, Gordon, and Allie in the back, and Chris as well for all the help. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week. We'll probably have another football assistant coach as a guest, in addition to other things on Golden Black Live, a week from today, 2 o'clock.